There is a halacha that is based on Kabbalah that I believe will help explain the difficulty that I've had my whole life in relating to the way the Holocaust was described and discussed. And I think that it will provide a basis for revamping, for changing dramatically the way that we approach that and possibly many other things in our lives. The halacha that I'm referring to is the prohibition. There's an isur that one is not permitted to look, to be mistakel. Mistakel doesn't mean to look. Mistakel means to be me'ayin, to look with intent carefully at the levana, the moon, at the keshes, at the rainbow, and it goes without saying, but it is explicitly said that one may not look at the face of a rasha, of an evil person. I don't remember when it was that the idea was planted in my head as to what that really means. What is the basis? There are many commentaries that speak about this prohibition and they say it's just Kabbalah and we're not going to go into it. But I'll go into it. Here's what the story is. Hashem made the world perfect. Absolutely perfect. There was no sin, nothing that was internal. There was no death. There were two great luminaries, two, the sun and the moon. There was no keshet. There was no rainbow. The world was perfect. There was only chesed. Nobody was poor. Nobody was broken. Nobody was ill. The world was perfect. A certain degree of that repeated at Har Sinai, where the world briefly returned to that perfection. But the world that Hashem made was perfect. We messed up the world. We made bad choices. But even before we made bad choices, the moon made a bad choice. It complained about the fact that there were two great luminaries. I don't claim to know what the mystery is behind this discussion. The Gemara in Chulin, Daf Samach, talks about the discussion between the Hashem and the moon. And Hashem says to the moon, L'chi mi'ati es atzmech, make yourself small. And the moon is not happy. And the Hashem offers the moon all sorts of compensations. You're Hakotan, but the Yaakov will be called the Kotan, and the Nevi'im will be called Hakotan, Shmuel Hakotan. Yaakov, of course, was born as the Kotan. I'm going to give you the stars. Nothing satisfies the Levana. Says the Gemara, Hashem turns to Bnei Yisrael and says that when you're bringing the monthly korban, when you bring the korban for Rosh Chodesh, include me. Imagine this. Include me in the korban because I need an atonement for making the moon small. So, well, if you need an atonement, that must mean that there's something wrong with making the moon small, in which case make the moon big again. I will. There will be a time. Shehem asidim li'ischadesh kemosa, that like the moon will once again be radiant. Now it's not radiant. Now it's reflected. There are features of the world that are not the way Hashem intended the original plan to be. And somebody who is misbonen, somebody who's mistakel, somebody who is looking at a part of creation that is a lakui, that is defective, is violating the principle of being mistakel b'levana. That means that there aren't meant to be criminals in the world. Why are you thinking about and looking at criminals? So if you say, well, I'm protecting myself, what? Protecting yourself, that's a toeles, protect yourself. But the kricharayim, and I want to know what's going on with the criminals. I want to know what's going on with a corrupt politician. That's being mistakel b'levana. Being mistakel b'levana means looking at anything in the world, dwelling on anything in the world that is not the way Hashem intended it to be. And that can include whatever it is. So this is not just about seeing the good in your situation, or seeing the good in a person, or seeing the life, through a positive lens. This is choosing to align oneself with the world that Hashem created, and to ignore, to the extent that it is possible, to ignore that which does not align with the way that Hashem created the perfect world. Imagine that there are people who actually viewed these monsters, these films that these monsters made while they were brutally attacking and killing Jews. Imagine somebody looking at that, being mistakel in such a thing. What could be a worse offense of being mistakel b'levana? Of course, there can be no justification. But it starts with people who turn and look when somebody has an accident. They look on the road, they look, because we are so indoctrinated by the horrific Western world to look at that which is defective in the Bria. We are stimulated endlessly to look at that which is defective. Why is Lashon Hara such a horrible offense? Because it highlights that which is defective in the Bria. You're not supposed to look that way. Look the other way. Don't look that way. And certainly don't dwell on it. Don't focus on it. Certainly don't speak about it. Your life should be entirely based on looking at that which enhances your connection to the original creation. That means whenever you see chesed, whenever you see niflaos habore, when you see the miracles, when you see Hashem's kindness, when you see Hashem's showering the world with life and with kindness, that is your focus. How did he die? What happened? How did he this? How did he that? That's what we need to know about death. So if a person's death inspires one to up their game, to be more engaged, to up their kindness, to replicate some of the kindnesses of the person who lived, wonderful. If it's meant to humble the person and they use death to humble themselves, beautiful, beautiful, use it. No, I just want to know all about the death. Tell me about the death. That is being mistakel b'levana. And that's us. Don't tell me about the death. When the Chavetz Chaim walked into a staff room in the Radin Yeshiva, he announced that the certain Rebbe has been reassigned to the Yeshiva Shel Mala. And so now we're going to rearrange who's going to give which shir, because this particular Rebbe has been reassigned to the yeshiva Shalmala. That was as much as he was willing to say about death. And I don't care how far away anyone finds themselves from this ideal. I know people who only see the divine in people, and they only see the divine in the world. I know people like that, and I have known people like that. And it has always struck me as that the difference between me and them is like the difference between East and West. But now I realize that that's where we're supposed to be aiming. The goal is to arrive there. How far can a person get? I have no idea. But one thing is certain. You're not allowed to be mistakel b'levana. And anytime you are highlighting something that shouldn't be, somebody's sick, Rahman al-Litzlan, it inspires you to daven, fantastic. No, I have to kricharain. Are you a doctor trying to save somebody? What are you kriching arain in illness? What are you doing? Why are you there? Kricharain in death, and kricharain in wars, and kricharain in corrupt politicians. You think that's the way Hashem wanted the world to be? You think that's the way He created the world? He didn't create the world, not with illness, not with death, and not with corrupt politicians. He didn't create the world with that. If you need to see it, so you see it. You need to protect yourself, protect yourself. If there's a toeles, if there's something to be gained, which means that it brings you closer to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. For example, Oave Hashem, Sinu Ra. That a hatred of evil can be a profound expression of a person's love and closeness to Hashem. So then go ahead and hate the Ra, but make sure you're doing it because you're an Ohev Hashem, and not because you're kriching arayin in something that is that defect in the world. Be careful. You don't have to answer to me. I'm not Hashem's cop. But you must know that it's also to be mistakel b'levana. And that leads us to the understanding of why it is that it's so horrible that there's so many books about the Holocaust. Horrible. It is simply an expression of the horrible tendency of people to find that which is defective in the world. To find it and analyze it and think about it and kricharain in it. We're not meant to do that. You want to write the keynotes for it so that it inspires tshuva. So you want to think about it so that it humbles you. You want to think about it so that you know the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. All well and good. If you can find a toelis, then by all means. But the kricharain, I need to know all the details. You don't need to know all. That is, Hashem did not create a world with a Holocaust. You want to see, every word of the Tochacha was fulfilled. Oh, every word of the Tochacha was fulfilled. And I'm going to listen and hear for the events that happened to see how every single word that Hashem predicted would happen did indeed happen. Toeles, useful, by all means. That helps you. That builds your dveikus b'Hashem to see that Hashem predicted everything. And that He predicted, for example, that there would always be B'nai Torah. That no matter how far we drift away, there will be seats of the Beis Medrash filled. Of people who are dedicating themselves to learning Torah. Anizos brisi osam amar Hashem. Ruchi asher alecha udvarai asher samti beficha lo yamushu mipicha umipi zaracha umipi zera zaracha me'atov yadolam. You want to go and see and go and think about the amazing miracle how Hashem saved the She'eris HaPleita of Klal Yisrael and brought them back to the Beis Medrash. Wonderful. I'm not going to tell anyone what is and what is not a toelis. But everyone needs to know that there is a limit. There's a block that says, don't be mistakel b'levana. Don't look at that which is not part of the original creation. Be an oreach tov. An oreach tov is very selective about what he sees. He sees everything in light of how much the host did for him. Even if the host maybe perhaps did very, very little for him on an actual technical level. But we have the ability to be selective. And the selection is based on what brings us closer to our relationship with Hashem. And because gratitude brings us closer to our relationship to Hashem, that's what I'm going to focus on. So I'm going to just be more and more grateful, even if it's absurd. But that brings us closer, then focus on the gratitude. And that which brings you further, ignore it. Yeah, but he set up for his children anyway. He was making the meal anyway. How much did I eat anyway? Didn't eat all that much. And he was making a meal for his wife, for his family. It wasn't, I'm not. Wait a second. In what way does that what way does that bring you closer? Everything has to be filtered through one filter. What brings me closer to be Dovek Bashem? And being Dovek Bashem is being Dovek in the way that Hashem made the world Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The world was absolutely only one thing, an expression of Hashem's Chesed. And so if it brings you closer, grab it. If it doesn't bring you closer, just ignore it. And so you have people, we had an exchange a couple of years ago with people, non-Jews, who were fascinated by the people who were killed in the incident that also took the life of our grandfather, of Ephraim ben Eliezer, Hashem Yinkom Damo, whose Yortzeh was today. Why do you think they were interested? They're interested because they're fascinated with death. If you ever look at what the non-Jewish world passes for entertainment, it's all just people dying, burned, blown up, whatever. One wonderful Jew, Rav Yosef Sorotzkin, said that a Jew always stops at a construction site. He always wants to see something being built, something being developed, something being planned, something being built. And a non-Jew stops to watch a fire, stops to watch something being blown up. And they'll pay millions to create all sorts of entertainment around things being blown up and people being killed, Rahman al-Islam. That's the difference. Because they are not coming closer to Hashem. They have no agenda to come closer to Hashem. And our agenda is exclusively to come eternally closer to Hashem. And so we are not going to go along with those who simply wanted to describe the Holocaust because they wanted to tell a horror story. We reject it absolutely at the deepest possible level. You've got to justify it. What's the toelis of looking at a broken world? There is, and if you can't find a real toelis that brings a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then you're looking at the Levana, and that's awesome. And so hopefully as we go forward, we will have made a shift and a break from everything that's being written about or said about the Holocaust, an absolute break in order to see the Shekhinah in each Jew, in order to see Hashem's salvation in the world, in order to be grateful for that which we have and that which we receive. And we're not going to kricharayim. We're not going to crawl around in trying to explore and examine what is broken about a world that has, we know that there's plenty broken. We know. We don't need to be advertising the fact, and we certainly don't need to be focusing on it.